Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Release.
Come on, Brent. Line's good. Got real close.
The hair high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham. Scott not alongside, as always. He just texted me that he's stuck at the grocery store trying to figure out whether he needs ketchup or catsup. But have no fear, we got a great episode for you today as we caught up with Laura Frigette, who is the executive director of the Northern Ontario Curling Association. Actually met Laura last summer at the North Bay Summer Bonspiel, and we talked a lot there about kind of just the state of Northern Ontario curling, the state of curling in general. And with the Northern Ontario Curling Championships having kicked off yesterday, Tuesday, as I record this, wanted to catch up with her, see what's going on. We have ragged on the Northern Ontario curling streaming for a long time. And that's something actually she raised with me when we played her last year. One of the first things that she said was, "Oh, you guys kill us on the streaming," which is true. We do. And we talked about that. So I wanted to reach out and get a sense of what the provincial playdown season is like for an executive director, because it's not just the men's and women's play. You got the juniors going on, the U18, then later you got seniors, masters, mixed doubles, the club level events. There's just a lot going on for people in this position all across the country. So we wanted to catch up with Laura and get a sense not only of Northern Ontario, but just in general, the landscape for the provincial associations across the country. So a bit of a wide-ranging conversation with Laura, who, in addition to being the executive director, is actually playing this week with Team Man in the Northern Ontario Provincials, which is going on up in Thunder Bay. So as I record this, it is Wednesday night, the 22nd of January, and we recorded this back on Saturday, the 18th of January, before Laura made the trek up to Thunder Bay. So I really enjoyed this one. Laura is a great executive director for the NOCA, and just a wonderful person to play against. She beat the crap out of us and was pleasant the whole time doing it. It was great to talk to her afterwards. Some great stories that she tells to both at the club back in the summer and here. Just a great chance to catch up with her. So I very much enjoyed this conversation. Think you will as well. So let's get right into my chat with Laura Frigette. All right, and Laura Frigette, the executive director of the Northern Ontario Curling Association, joins me now. Laura, how are you today?
I am good. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for joining us. Now, before we get into some of the questions that we have related to the Northern Ontario Curling Association, I was just a little background on yourself, because I know you play in addition to your role as the executive director. So what is your background in curling? When did you start playing? And what would you say your level of curling is compared to us lowly rec level players?
Yeah, so I started the classic way. My parents curled on Friday nights with two of their friends and shared a sitter, and then all of us kids went out on Sunday mornings together. So started when I was about 7, and I won't say how many years it's been. The number is getting really sad. But yeah, I started up in Timmins, actually. So I live in North Bay now, and curled all through my childhood, high school, and then the North Bay Granite Club was my first stop when I came here to Nipissing University. Back in
Go
2006.
Lakers.
Yeah. We were at a Lakers basketball game last night, actually, and
nice.
Carlton took them down. But
a powerhouse. So, it's a national powerhouse. They can't do anything about that.
It's true. Yeah. So Lakers alumni, and joined the Granite Club back in 2006 when I got here, and have been a member there ever since. So curling's always been part of my life. I have a teaching background, but got into the working world of curling, the admin side of things, in 2021. Started as a competition coordinator for the Northern Ontario Curling Association and the Ontario Curling Council. So helping run their games program. And that was a busy year, making up from COVID. We had an Ontario Winter Games and a Canada Games that same season. So that was pretty wild. And then I took over the executive director role. It'll be 2 years this May, I guess, from Mike Harris. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, that's a meteoric rise to the top of the Northern Ontario Curling Association. Now, I think when people think of member associations across the country, they think of relatively large groups of people who are meeting to decide things. Now, you are the executive director. There's a board as well, but how many people roughly are we talking about in official, whether paid or volunteer roles with Northern Ontario Curling?
So it's me. Yeah, so executive director, but also ...
Yeah.
Um, my old role was never filled again. It was part of a grant. So yeah, it's me. We pay a bookkeeper to help us out with that, and then I have a board of 9. So we meet monthly. But other than that, yeah, it's just me. So this is a really busy time of year.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff going on with competitions, but we also have 45-ish member clubs that we service. So it's a big job, and yeah, lots on the go, especially during curling season.
Yeah. So, what is the role of your member association? We had Matt Allen on in the summer, and we talked a little bit about ways that in Ontario. Now, I realize Northern Ontario is in Ontario, but the member association of Ontario, how he was trying to reach out to clubs, and he doesn't have as big of a geographic area as you do to try to cover, but I think he has more clubs.
Yeah.
So, for you, what is the principal task? What does a day to day look like for you?
Yeah, it depends on the time of the season. Right now, so much of my time is taken up by competitions, but the kind of bookends of the curling season are really club focused. Matt and I work really closely together, along with Aaron Jarvis, used to be Jen Ferris with Ontario Curling Council. So those 3 organizations in Ontario, we meet twice a month, and try to really work hard together to um, bring curling in Ontario to the forefront. So yeah, lots of club-based stuff beginning and end of the season, helping them get started. All kinds of programs we help funnel down from Curling Canada. Things like getting their policies set up and going on the governance side of things, helping them start learn to curl programs, encouraging them to have multiple intakes instead of just one registration a year. All of those things. But it all takes time, and a lot of, well, you know this, almost all of our clubs are completely volunteer run.
Yeah.
So yeah, this time of year, it's hard to get everybody in the same room, but we do meet as a whole group, not in person, but virtually twice a year to share ideas and successes and challenges and things like that.
So, for you as the executive director trying to bring all these together, is there, I'm sure this exists in the other provinces as well, but maybe not to the same extent because North Bay is a really long way from Thunder Bay. Say, like, are there local concerns that really don't exist across Northern Ontario that maybe in Southern Ontario, some of the challenges are the same between, Mississauga and Ajax and Kingston? Do you see a lot of local variation when you're dealing with the clubs?
Yeah, I mean, we have cities still up here. So
Yeah.
our Thunder Bay, North Bay, Sudbury, those clubs often have paid staff. They don't have as much of a problem recruiting membership. They have a much bigger population base to draw from. But I mean, very similarly to all over Canada, really, we have rural clubs that are tiny, 2 and 3 sheeters in small communities. In Northern Ontario, especially, a lot of these communities are um, they're so dependent on industry, and sometimes that industry comes and goes, and the clubs really feel the effects of that,
Hmm.
much less than the city clubs. So it's tons of challenges and lots of different challenges. And so every day is different. Every conversation with every club is different. And I'm really grateful to Bobby. I'm sure you've spoken to Bobby Ray before. He's now at Curling Canada and used to be in this chair, but he's done a ton of work to develop resources for clubs of all shapes and sizes.
So let's get into some of the provincial championships because it is provincial championship season. You have the U18 going on right now in Timmins, you mentioned, and then the provincial. Now, you don't have to get into this, but just note that there was a story this week that Kruger has pulled all of their sponsorships of the provincial women's championships. They're going to
Yeah.
keep it at the national level, but not at the provincial level. So the Northern Ontario Women's Championship, is that what you're calling it this year?
Yeah, we don't have another title sponsor yet for that championship. So yeah, it's sad to see that sponsorship go away. I know the players will be really disappointed, as you probably read. The jewelry is also
Yeah.
going away as a result, and that's been a really special tradition for a really long time. So yeah, it's too bad. So yeah, we're not calling it the Northern Ontario Scotties anymore, and it's so tough, that name Scotties. It's going to be
Yeah.
a tough one to take out of your your vocabulary, I think, because
Yeah. Well, I saw I think it was Jerry Gertz started a petition to maybe let's keep the name Scotties. And if I'm Kruger Products, I'm like, yeah, keep the name Scotties. I don't have to pay for it and you're going to keep it. Great. Like that's free
yeah,
advertising for them. But within that, the Northern Ontario Women's Provincials is kicking off next week. Now, you're a competitor this year in this event, but you're also the executive director of Northern Ontario Curling. So I want you to keep the executive director hat on for a while before you get onto the competitor side.
yeah,
What
sounds
does
good.
it take to put on a provincial championship of this magnitude? And let's start with even how do you select the host club? Like what is that process like and determining where it's going to be?
Yeah, so we're actually already in the process of selecting next year's host. We Northern Ontario is the geography is huge, as you've mentioned. So we're broken up into 6 regions, as we call it, and we have clubs within each of those regions. We have a rotation schedule that we go through, so we already know in the next 5 years which region each championship is scheduled to be in. So we welcome bids from that region for that year. This is just for the men's and women's championships. So our men's is also actually next week at the same time as the women's. And we accept the bids and we review them as a board and select a host. And it takes a very large group of very dedicated volunteers, and emphasis on volunteers.
Right.
It's the host committees at these clubs are incredible, and they do this on their own time. They all have full-time jobs generally. And it's a huge undertaking we've got 13 men's teams and 7 women's teams at the championship this year. So it's a big event.
So what is the minimum requirement? You mentioned there's a lot of, 2-3 cheat clubs, rural clubs, but you also would need, given that how big Northern Ontario is, people aren't necessarily going to be commuting in for their games. You need hotels and
Yeah.
food and all that kind of stuff. So is there a minimum requirement that you have as part of the bidding process?
Yeah, so last year our championship was in Little Current, which is on Manitoulin Island, and it's a small community, but they welcomed us with open arms, and they, in their bid package, had to talk about what kind of accommodations, whether they could accommodate that many people. Last year it was in an arena, so that's a whole other animal, and that we've got to talk about. This year it's in a club, but it's in an 8-sheeter, so they've covered 2 sheets, and we'll have bleachers. They've set up the bleachers, and they're tall. They're going to be able to fit lots of people in there. So covered 2 sheets for bleachers, and then they've covered the other end sheet for like warm-ups and broom bags and stuff like that. So as much of an arena feel as we can get is kind of the goal. And we've got some incredible ice makers up here in Northern Ontario that'll do their best to emulate what we'd seen in arena as well.
So is that part of the process for you too, the ice makers? And is that up to the association, or is that also left to the local host committee?
So we've got 3 kind of national level ice makers, 4, I guess, who can make incredible ice. So last year, our top 3 ice makers were all together in Little Current. Thankfully, they all work amazingly well together. They got together without us even asking, and
Wow.
came together and worked as a team and did an incredible job. So we'll have Brent Adamson this year up in Thunder Bay, and I know he's on the team that'll be doing the National Scotties as well in February. So it's kind of cool that we're having our provincial in the same place where
Yeah.
the national will be. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great city. Whenever there has been an event, Scotty's there. The one 2 years ago, was it 2022? It was a little disappointing that not everybody could get in the building until the last weekend, but it's nice that Curling Canada is going back. That'll be a really fun week there in February, and a fun week for the provincial championships as well. Within that, of course, should note that there is a very popular team that'll be the home team there in Thunder Bay. Now, I want you to put your competitor hat on just for a second in this. So you are playing with Lauren Mann, right? Now, the people of Thunder Bay are very nice. They're very polite. But if you get on a run and, or say up in a game against Krista McCarville, they might not be that thrilled about that. So
No.
as a player, as a competitor, how have you and your team have you talked about what that's going to be? Or even just when you're out there, Krista McCarville's out there, the crowd's going to be behind them. It could get loud. Like, what is your prep for that when there's very clearly a home team and trying to get ready for what that will look like?
Yeah, we certainly know that we are not the favorites on the women's side. I think that goes without saying. I've been playing against Krista for a lot of years, and I actually played with Kendra Lilly for a few years, right when she came out of junior. So we know them super well. And obviously, as an ED, I know how much they bring to the sport, especially in Northern Ontario. So we've definitely talked about it. We know that the crowd will be on their side. Very similarly to last year in Little Current, Tanner Horgan had the whole crowd on their side, and Trevor managed to pull out the win in the final. So on the flip side and on the men's side, I think Trevor is going to have lots of the crowd behind him, and the John Nepping team maybe not. So
Right.
we always love playing in front of a crowd. It doesn't matter whose side they're on, but having the fans in the stands is kind of the most exciting thing for us. So.
Yeah. Now, given that it's in Thunder Bay, now, again, you don't have to get too much into the numbers for this, but are the provincial championships for you at the men's and women's level, are they revenue generating? Are they a source of funding that helps support some of the other events that you have to put on as a member association?
Not really.
Okay.
So we obviously collect the entry fees, and we give a portion of that to the host committee. The host committee comes up with their own budget, and the profits, aside from 10%, is all theirs. So we only take 10% of whatever profit they make. And sometimes that's not very much, depending on where the event is. That being said, sometimes the entry fees can offset some of our smaller events. We just had our Masters Provincial, and we had 4 men's teams and no women's teams compete in that. So when you consider paying the host fees to the club and paying the officials per diem and some hotel money, and then buying the jackets for the teams and the banner and the framed hearts, like those 4 entry fees don't go very far. So yeah, sometimes our bigger events help offset the losses in some of our other events. But it's certainly not a big moneymaker for us as an association.
Now, I played you last year at the North Bay Summer Spiel, and one of the first things you said to me when you saw that we were wearing the shirts, and you said, "Oh yeah, okay."
It was your voice. I recognized your voice the second I saw you. Actually,
you said, "Oh, you guys killed us on the streaming," something along those lines, and that's true. We did. Now, before we get into sort of the logistics of what streaming looks like for the Northern Ontario Curling Association, could you tell the story of what happened in the, I don't know, I can't remember if it was the 10th end or if it was an extra last year when Trevor Bono won, of why the stream was what it was in that moment when, of course, the famous video of Team McCarville watching in the car. Like, could you tell that story? Because it's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, so I was obviously in the crowd. I'm there to present the trophy and with my ED hat on, ready for the end of that game. And the stream was done on YouTube. And actually, the stream that Little Current did, this is kind of a cool story too. They bought the equipment themselves to stream one sheet, and had the robotics team from the local high school run the equipment as volunteer hours, and then donated the equipment that they purchased to the high school, so the high school could now stream their sporting events, which I thought was kind of a neat legacy to leave behind. Yeah. So, but in a very key moment in that game, as we all saw on social media, the stream went down. And so I'm sitting there, we're in an arena, it's cold. And so I've had my phone on, like texting back and forth with people, and all of a sudden I get like 100 messages. The stream's down, the stream's down, the stream's down. So I, in a moment of kind of panic, open our Northern Ontario Curling Association, Team Northern Ontario Facebook page, and just go live on Facebook. But my phone is at like 8% because I've been sitting in this cold arena for 10 ends now. So my phone's at 8%. I'm kind of panicking that my phone's going to die. So I'm hoping the stream is going to come back up, and doesn't it go to a measure at the end of this game. So the way the stream is set up, you also couldn't really see in the overhead camera where those rocks were, because they were kind of out in the edge of the 12-foot. So I'm live streaming, and the official's walking over with the measuring stick, and he's not moving quick. So I'm thinking, like, hurry up, because my phone's going to die. So he finally gets over there and does the measure, and I'm freezing and my hands are shaking, and thank goodness the battery, I think I was down to like 2% by the time the measure finished. And everyone saw the McCarville video, and they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Did they shake hands? The gloves came off and the handshakes happened. And yeah, it was I did what I could, and I'm
Right.
glad I was there to go live. And but yeah, technology is unpredictable. So
Yeah, but that's great. And it gave us that great moment of Team McCarville in the car going nuts. Like
yeah.
it's just great. Um, so what? Again, recognizing that we have been very critical of Northern Ontario curling streaming over the years, and when you said to me like we can't all be Saskatchewan because we don't all have SaskTel as a sponsor, that is very true and very fair. But what are some of the challenges associated with streaming these events that that you're faced with when, I mean, there is an audience for them. People want to see these provincial championships. So what are some of the biggest obstacles for you in trying to set that up?
Yeah, for us, I mean, as an association, I think people need to remember that all of the member associations, we're nonprofits. Like we are not big businesses. We're not the curling group people of the world, the Nick Solskis of the world who have the money for things like Home Team Live. And streaming has become very expensive. Just for example, our event next week, the host committee, and this would be their responsibility. So they're a host committee, they have their own budget. They got a quote for one sheet to be streamed of every draw, and it was $10,000.
Wow.
And if you
Jeez.
think about a host committee, their goal is to get bodies in the building. They want people in the seats, they want fans in the stands. That's how they're going to make money, is by selling tickets. And so there's not really an incentive for them to have a stream, to spend that $10,000. There's not going to be a return on investment unless they have a major sponsor. And so I was chatting with Bobby about this last week, and he said, well, maybe it's a NOCA expense. Maybe you guys need to pay for it. And I got thinking and I said, okay, but again, where's the return on investment for us? Because of course there's an audience, but that audience is big curling fans, people who are next weekend going to be sitting there with, I don't know how many screens open, watching the finals of all of these events.
Yep.
So we're flipping back and forth between Ontario and Saskatchewan. And so obviously those people already love curling, the families of these athletes. But we're not getting the eyeballs of people who are going to now flood our curling clubs and join the curling clubs in Northern Ontario and pay dues to us to give us that return on investment. So it's really difficult. We understand. I love watching curling. I stream Facebook feeds, like the U18's happening this week, and the teams are streaming their games, and I'm checking in. I'm as big a curling fan as anybody, and I completely understand. I've got family across the country who would love to tune in. But for us, it's the logistics and the costs are just a really big challenge. And then as soon as you put up a paywall.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we saw. I mean, again, the numbers for the final of the mixed doubles trials now is Saturday afternoon, which traditionally isn't the best time for TV, but nevertheless, I think it was about 20,000, which it's not a terrible number, of course, but that's not necessarily going to drive a lot of revenue for an association. So for you then, what is, other than like people like us being like talking about it on a podcast, is there any like negative pushback? Like, okay, there might not be an ROI on it, but what about, like, is there any discussion at the board level of like reputation of the association and sort of the keeping up with the Joneses with again, Saskatchewan might be unfair in terms of what they have access to. But even New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, they've had not bad streams over the years. Like, so in terms of where Northern Ontario sits within the country on this question, how do those discussions go within the association and with the board?
Yeah, it's interesting because we've got some competitive, like Trevor Bonneau is on our board. So we've got some competitive curlers on the board. They understand the importance of it as well, but they also see our financials and know like that line we're trying to ride here. Yep. And it really depends on the facility that we're in. So a couple of years ago, the stream was done by Jerry Gertz in Curling Stadium in Kenora. And there was a title sponsor for that, and that was great. This year we're in a curling club and the infrastructure is not there. They're bringing in some equipment to stream one sheet. They will be streaming sheet 4. And so the finals will be streamed. The quality won't be Curl Sask, but it will be what it will be.
Right.
And then we've got a couple of clubs here in Northern Ontario that have curling stadium installed. And like, I don't know if you watched any of the women's event that was in North Bay
Yeah,
And
that was pretty good.
yeah, so in Sault Ste. Marie has the same system installed. So the 2025, the Canadian Masters will be there at the end of March, and they'll be able to stream that. So some of the clubs are kind of getting on board, some of the bigger clubs, and being able to get some of this equipment in. But yeah, reputationally, I mean, I know Curling Ontario is not streaming this year. It's going to a TV feed, and they're getting all kinds of flack about that, but it was that or nothing. So, yeah, it's tough. We have this conversation, all of us EDs get in a room twice a year, and Nolan at Curling Canada, we all understand the challenge, and we know that this is the way the world is going. It's going away from network TV. But if you think about 5-6 years ago, streaming wasn't a thing at all. Right. So sometimes we're like, well, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it is better than nothing. I don't always love the stationary camera. I mean, if it's a big enough game or if I'm doing something else, I'm keeping track, I can. But I do appreciate the incredible expense of a Saskatchewan level of a stream on that. And yeah, it's really hard to get people into a game, watch a game, and then get them into the club. And really, a lot of these provincial championships, you're streaming them for a majority of the audience is outside of the member association. So
100%.
Yeah. That's certainly a challenge as well. Is there something to do with, say, the ads in the ice? Like I've noticed on the few times that, like, I was a member at the Rideau Club here in Ottawa when they had the mixed nationals here. And the ads in the ice that season were very different. So is there something there too, like what you or the club can sell in terms of the local ads, not even excluding questions associated with the title sponsor, but is there something in a revenue sharing with that?
Yeah, I think Matt and I have talked about this as well. Like the last three years, that has even become much more challenging. Businesses they used to be much more receptive and excited about the opportunity to be featured even in a commercial on a stream, or their logo kind of like static at in the bottom corner. And that's not as much of a selling feature anymore for businesses. So yeah, it's tough. I think we're all back from COVID, I guess you could say. And so these businesses are being flooded with opportunities for sponsorship. And I think that's something that us as EDs and as MAs need to get together, and Curling Canada even, we got to figure out how to market this in a way that's more lucrative to sponsors, because I think that's the only way we can make this sustainable for all of us.
Now, I asked Elaine Degg-Jackson about this, and I'll ask you as well, because you have now things that didn't really exist before. Obviously, like the PWHL is one, a big one. Soccer Canada has exploded, certainly on the men's side, and the women's side is bigger than it has been. I would argue they've always had a lot of success. Basketball Canada had a great run at the Olympics last year. So I would, from where I sit, there's more competition for dollars coming in, given that there's been, it's been good for the country that these sports are doing well, but maybe bad for someone in your chair and the other executive directors across the country. Have you felt that the increase in the sporting landscape, the number of, let's say, competitors in the sporting landscape, has had an impact on curling in general?
Yeah, I guess. I think we'll see. We haven't had those season of champions events yet, right? Like it'll be interesting to see when we get to February and March and it's back on network TV, how that affects those things. I know we're getting together as a group. The women in curling leaders are getting together in Thunder Bay, and I'm sure that'll be a topic of discussion. I love the direction that group is going. I'm always honored to be in the room with those women who have impacted the sport in so many ways. And I know you're a huge Scotties fan.
Yep.
And I always have been as well. So super excited to see that event be on network TV, obviously still. And the curling fans have been chomping at the bit. You see it in Facebook comments all the time. Why isn't this on TV?
Yeah.
So we'll finally be back on network TV on TSN in a couple of weeks. And the women will be in the spotlight. And I'm sure it's going to be an incredible event. So.
Yeah, best event of the year for me by far, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was curious. Like, it was curious to see that the trials were not on TV, that those were streamed. I don't know if that's a canary in the coal mine type thing for what's coming down the path, or if it's just sort of the changing landscape of things, or it's just, I mean, for TSN, it's the World Juniors at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And they're
Yeah,
wall
I
to wall
think,
on that. So
yeah, a tough time of year, and it's not an every year thing. So it's one of
yeah,
those like kind of once every 4 years, and it's at a much different time than it was the last time around. So
yeah,
just a combination of things. I think
yeah.
I have not heard any rumblings that those network like TSN season champion events are going away anytime soon.
Right.
So
Yeah. And two, I mean, it's mixed doubles can be an awkward for TV time slots, right? The games are usually like an hour 40, 45, right? Like, I guess you could try to stretch it to 2 hours, but like it's kind of an awkward time for TV. So all that being said, let's get into the Scotties in Thunder Bay, which is coming up. And what is the relationship, if any, that the provincial association has with Curling Canada and the local organizers in putting on the national championship? Like, where does the Northern Ontario Curling Association fit in between Curling Canada and the local group in Thunder Bay?
So it's actually in a lot of the community engagement and youth engagement stuff, kind of on the outside of the main event. So things like we'll be hosting a hit draw tap provincial the first morning of the Scotties on the ice there, at the same time that there's a girls rock event happening at the Port Arthur Curling Center. We're involved in getting the clubs to give ice time for free tri curling events for families. Those families will all get free tickets to a draw. We get the rocks and rings in the schools. Yeah, so like the Future Stars program, marketing all of those extra events to try and get the community and the kids involved is kind of our biggest role. So I'll be there opening weekend. I mean, we'll see what happens next week, but
Right, you might be there all week. Come on,
yeah, we'll see. I mean, that would be a huge deal for our team, and would be probably a tricky thing for the host committee if Chris is not the one there, but yeah, so I'll be there opening weekend. We'll be doing that hit draw tap shootout. I'm super excited. We've got 15 kids who are all so excited to be on the ice at the Gardens that morning. And then I'll be involved in the women in curling stuff that weekend. So they're doing a coaches rock just for women that afternoon. We've got the conference that Jill Officer will be the keynote speaker at on Sunday, and take in some of the excitement in Thunder Bay. So yeah, the local host committee does a ton of the work, and obviously they're only 2 years out from their last time hosting. So the template was there. They just got to put the fans in the stands. So.
And in terms of the process for applying for it, now this I think predate you in the chair of executive director, but I think Curling Canada accepts bids. Is the provincial association part of the bidding process, or is that really left to the local organizers?
Yeah, it's mostly the local organizers. I think it depends on what community it is. Sometimes the local group will come to us for like a letter of support or something like that. But it's generally speaking the local group that puts in the bid, and we obviously support them wholeheartedly.
Is it the same for all national competitions? Obviously, the Scotties and the Brier are the two ones that make a lot of money and get a lot of attention. But you do have the national seniors, you have the juniors, the U18, the college, the university. Like there's a whole bunch of national championships. Is it the same for all those? Same process?
Yeah, same process. So Timmins hosted the U18 a couple of years ago. They put their bid together. We were involved and supported them a little bit, but largely it was the group there that put the bid together, and they were successful in getting that event.
Do you see any downstream effect of when there is a national championship in the member association, whether it's across the association or locally? Like, has that been tracked, that you have seen that bringing these events in does help the local club, does help the local curling community?
So I can speak. So Timmins hosting the U18 a couple of years ago, their junior program is very full. I love,
Nice.
They post pictures on Sundays, and there's tons of kids out there. I know they had a full Learn to Curl program this year that have rolled over into a rookie league. So, I mean, hard to say whether that was the excitement of the U18 or just the growth of curling in general, or what maybe they're doing some new things to bring those people in. I know the excitement in Thunder Bay is next level for the Scotties this year. So the junior programs are booming there, and the excitement of bringing the kids to the gardens, and our hit draw tap program hadn't run since before COVID, and this was the first year back, and we had over 200 kids
Oh, that's awesome.
compete across the province. Yeah. So they were given 2 opportunities. So the Thunder Bay area kids, we've got a couple of kids from other communities. We'll do it in Thunder Bay, but we also offer a second option. We're hosting U15 Rockfest in North Bay. So
yeah.
we've got the West Bay and the East Bay. So we've
Yeah.
kind of covered off the geography there. So the kids that are closer to North Bay can come and do that in March instead of having to travel all the way to Thunder Bay. So
Yeah, that is quite a distance
it is,
to have
yeah.
to go between those 2 cities. Now, the excitement, as you said, in Thunder Bay is high. See what the results are next week, of whether or not that changes things. But again, for you as the executive director, you have a team that on the women's side that is a perennial contender to win. They have not won yet, but they're in the playoffs pretty much every year. They missed last year, had a tough week, but generally speaking, they're in the playoffs a lot. They're a popular team, maybe a polarizing team when it's talked about how much they play on tour and stuff. They generate a lot of discussion in that sense, but I think most fans really like them and kind of root for them. They have almost an underdog feel because they don't play that much. For the association, when you have a team like that is kind of, I would argue, the signature team of the association, has been for at least a decade on the women's side. What is your relationship as the executive director with the team, and do they get, I don't want to say like any sort of prioritization from the association or anything like that, but like, do you try to give them maybe extra support because they are a national level team that can win? They have the ability to win a Scotties. So as the association, do you kind of offer some support to a team like that?
I mean, they obviously have done a ton, just the same as like Brad Jacobs' team prior, that through his Olympic run. He was kind of the face of Northern Ontario, and you could name teams way back to the Al Hackner and Lorraine Lang days. Their team has brought a ton of recognition to Northern Ontario. Financially, we don't really support any team more than any other team. Everybody kind of gets the same deal. But yeah, we're always supporting them. We're behind them in all of the events that they play in. I know it's not many, but I think they really highlight how effective practice is. They do get together more often than people realize. Geography again, we've got Andrea on the East Coast and Kendra in Sudbury, and they've got Rick Lang, and Rick Lang's expertise is unmatched, and he works really hard with that team. So yeah, I mean, financially, no, we don't really have much to give them, but with my ED hat on and not my competitor hat, it would be really special to see them on the ice again in Thunder Bay and being able to get that Scotties in front of that home crowd. I know it was so disappointing for them the last time to be the home team and have the empty stands. Like, that's not the Scotties experience you want to have. So it's great to see them making a run at it again this year.
Okay. I'm going to ask this as a hypothetical. Okay. Do executive directors, yourselves and the rest across the country, at provincial playdowns, do you root for specific teams to represent your province?
So I will be honest, this is my second year as executive director, and I competed last year also. So I've always been a competitor as well as the ED at these events. And I will also say my husband's competing on the men's side last year and this year. So it's hard for me to say, honestly, I've always been kind of a root for the underdog person. But the thing that I love probably the most about curling, and I think this is partly why I love the Scotties and the Brier, is the stories that develop. So for me, like last year, seeing Trevor's team, which included Mike McCarville, and Krista's team go, but then also knowing that their daughter Bella won our U18 and our U20, and Mike also went to our Canadian mixed team.
Right.
Like, that's one of those stories in curling that is just so neat to see. So to see Trevor be able to pull out the win and know that for their family, that was national championship number 5 or 6 in the same season, that's pretty incredible. So I think all of us feel that way. the stories are what get people invested, involved, get the eyeballs on the event for the whole week. And I think at the provincial level, we can probably do a better job, even on social media, of developing those stories as the weeks go on at provincial championships, just the same as we see at the Scotties. I would love, if I wasn't playing, to do one of those like montages. I mean, we all love, I don't know what's going to happen when Vic stops.
Yeah,
doing
the
his
Vic essay.
montages,
Yeah, gotta
because
have those.
you never miss those at the end of those events. So
Yeah.
I think we're always kind of pulling for the stories, right? We want whatever's going to get the most eyeballs on our events.
So there is no necessarily a correlation. Like if there's an upset, and whatever it was a few years ago, we'll use the Ontario example. Rachel Holman lost. I can't remember to who. I think it was 2016, 17, 18. One of those years she lost the provincial, and the team that came in wasn't bad. Obviously, they won the provincial championship, but they went 4-4 or something like that and didn't make the playoffs. The provincial associations, they don't see any like downside to that in terms of whether it's like just even having the crest on TV in the playoffs sort of thing. Like, is there anything like that if there is an upset, you're like, oh, that's maybe they're not going to do as well, and that's too bad.
I mean, it does make a difference. Trevor went to the Brier last year and ended up getting a ton of TV time. And so that was great. I mean, we love to see it as an association, not just his team, but they had a huge entourage of fans, which ended up getting a lot of attention as well. But I will say, I feel like in the last many number of years, our Northern Ontario teams have found a way to be the team that gets a lot of eyeballs at almost every event. So I suspect this year will be no different. And whoever represents us, we have a way of finding our way onto TSN. So
that is true. The Northern Ontario game, I feel like, has become a mandatory TV game if they're in the same pool. That's always sort of been a popular one for TSN to show, to the great frustration of everybody else in Canada. So I just want to ask this, and I made you sort of, I think we asked you this when we played you, but my friend Dean, our pal Dean, who has been on the show before, he's of the belief that the Northern Ontario Curling Association should not exist at all, that it's a provincial, it should be a provincial thing, and that there's no Northern Alberta, there's no Northern, like, this is his position that he kind of like half believes, but I think just likes talking about it more. Just generally speaking, the value of having a Northern Ontario specific association, in your mind, what is the benefit of having that?
I mean, we talk about, in some ways, the tradition is kind of it's holding us back as a sport. But I think the tradition of the Scotties and the Brier, I'll say the Brier first. Obviously, Northern Ontario hasn't had a team at the Scotties for forever. I competed in the very last Ontario Scotties and then the very first Northern Ontario Scotties. So, but having said that, my very first Ontario Scotties was in Kenora, Ontario. So as a team from North Bay, we drove to Toronto, we flew to Winnipeg, and we drove back into our own province to play the Ontario Scotties. So it was actually closer for teams from the GTA to catch their flights to Winnipeg and get back to Kenora than it was for me in Northern Ontario. Our country is vast and enormous, and I know many of the other provinces have these issues, this geography issue, but particularly here, it would take me many days to visit all of my curling clubs and a couple of time zones. We've got our own unique brand, I think. This Fear the Moose brand has kind of exploded over the last few years. And I think tons of people take pride in that. And so all of our social media is Team Northern Ontario. And while that does represent our competitive teams, I think it represents our clubs too. We're all Team Northern Ontario. We're all kind of trying to work together to face the challenges in the sport. So bringing more people through the doors, but other things like aging infrastructure and the cost of insurance. Our clubs I love seeing them come together and share solutions to these challenges. So I think, yeah, it's a special thing that we've got up here, and I totally understand how the rest of the country might feel, but I'm very grateful to the other EDs that I always sit with in the room. They're always very supportive of our member association and the strength that we have. And you think like Matt's got tons of clubs down in his area, so he's got like 150 or something, and I've got another 45 up here. And while I understand that people see the separation at the Scotties and Briar, we do work very closely together all year on things like club development and all the rest of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So we will hold on to our moose, and people will continue to fear the moose at the national championships, but we are working together as the province of Ontario on all things curling.
Yeah, I mean, there's been more Briar wins by Northern Ontario than a lot of the other provinces. So yeah, there's certainly value in the curling side of it. And I will say, as somebody who grew up in Southern Ontario in the GTA and then went to school in North Bay, you do feel the difference. Like there is a cultural difference between Southern and Northern Ontario for sure.
Yeah, and you could argue North Bay is like real close to Southern Ontario.
Yes. Yes, compared to the rest of the country, like it's pretty south, actually. Yeah,
we're the southernmost part of Northern Ontario, for sure.
Yeah, from a historic standpoint, you mentioned the Lorraine Lang teams. Like Heather Houston won the back-to-back as the skip. Lorraine was on those teams. Can Northern Ontario just take those as Northern Ontario Scotties wins now? Like
I would say we have. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We they may have had the red and black and white on, but they are definitely prides of Northern Ontario, and looking forward to seeing them both in Thunder Bay during the Scotties. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be very cool. Maybe. Since you have sway, do some like honor them on the ice before a draw, like a pregame something, if that's not already planned.
Yeah, they're having actually Legends reception. So anyone who can make it, who's a female champion from Northern Ontario, will be there with their Northern Ontario jackets. And yeah, so super excited for that. I'll be there with my ED hat on because I do not yet have a Northern Ontario jacket. It's still on my bucket list, but yeah, it'll be exciting to be in that room with all those former champions.
Yes, but as you say, maybe you'll be there with the 2025 Scotties Northern Ontario jacket on.
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. So Laura, just last question here for you. As we get through this season of champions, as we get through the big national events, and you start to turn your attention back to the clubs, as you say, in the shoulder seasons, you're really focused on the grassroots level. What are some of the priorities moving forward for Northern Ontario curling, and things that certainly would apply to the clubs that you're dealing with, but that maybe we're seeing all across the country?
Yeah, I think infrastructure is a huge one. We had a couple of clubs over Christmas. I mean, I'm sure you heard the Lloydminster story before that event started last weekend, but I've had a couple of clubs who very nearly lost their ice over Christmas holidays. We have one club who was closed all of last year, the Ottawa Curling Club, lost their entire plant and had to replace the entire thing. Tiny community just outside of Sudbury. And they were able to secure a grant and installed a state-of-the-art new system. And so I've been in touch with somebody from their club. They would love to invite other ice techs to their club to see the new system that they've installed, put them in touch with the company that installed it. So I think supporting clubs, I know there's some grant opportunities opening soon to help them replace some of that aging infrastructure. We need to get more learning facilitators trained up here in Northern Ontario for things like coaching courses and ice tech courses. So all of those things, we've got some gaps. And we need to fill them. And so I think Matt and Aaron and I need to get together face to face and kind of think ahead even over the next few years, and how the three of us can work together to efficiently move our organizations forward in Ontario. And then we'll be together as a group of EDs and Curling Canada staff again in May. And that's when we start kind of strategically thinking about the next season. And then post quad, I think we're kind of getting to the end of this quad, and the sport is changing quick, even just in the last couple of years. So there's lots coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, a lot going on. And certainly the way amateur sports are funded in Canada is affected by political situations and at the federal and likely at the provincial level, maybe this year, but certainly at the provincial level, I think it's required next year. So things could change on that front. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts that you have to deal with. It's certainly a tough gig, but it's one that clearly you're passionate about and from all accounts doing a great job at. So if people want to follow along with the provincial championships or just follow along with Northern Ontario curling in general, where can they keep up with everything you got going on?
Yeah, so curlnoca.ca is our website. You can find our live scoreboard there, and the Port Arthur Curling Center YouTube page, I think, is where the live stream will be, but you'll be able to find links on all of our social media in the coming days. We kick off Tuesday night with the first draw of the men's event. So that'll be January 21st, and the women's gets underway Wednesday afternoon. So should be a fun week. We're looking forward
and the
to
finals, are the finals Sunday?
Sunday, yeah. So the women will be Sunday afternoon, and the men will be 5:30 Eastern, I will say, because we do have
so you have the central that you have to deal with. Yeah,
we do. Yeah. Our board president lives in Kenora, so whenever we are setting meetings, I say your time or my time.
Well, awesome. Well, we will link to the Northern Ontario Curling Association in the show notes below. Check out the stream this weekend for the finals and the entire event up there in Thunder Bay. And Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks. Look forward to chatting with you again soon.
So there you have it. My chat with Laura Frechette, and I thank her for her time. And we will link to some of the Northern Ontario curling stuff down in the show notes below. And with that, I will say thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you have not yet, please do subscribe. Wherever it is you get your podcast, like, rate, comment, all that good stuff helps other people find the show, keeps us growing. Of course, you can head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com. Past episodes are there under the episodes tab, plus a link to all of the merch. You can follow us on the socials at Game of Stones Pod, Game of Stones Podcast on Facebook. And of course, if you want to let us know what you want to hear on the show, Game of Stones Podcast at gmail.com. Now, before I go, even though Scott's not here, have no fear. He will be back next week, but he will also be with me on Saturday, January the 25th, for some commentary. For the first time ever, we are going to do play-by-play of live curling on Saturday afternoon. It is the annual Rainbow Rockers bonspiel here in Ottawa at the Ottawa Curling Club. Scott and I are going to be doing the play-by-play for 2 of the qualifier games on Saturday afternoon. So the first game is 2:00 Eastern time, and then we will be doing the game at 4:30 as well. There will be live streaming starting at noon all the way through the final games, which should end around midnight Eastern time on Saturday. And then the championship games on Sunday are also going to be streamed. It's the Rainbow Rockers page on YouTube. We will put a link down in the show notes below to that page as to where these games will be streamed. We'll also post a link on the socials and at Facebook, all that kind of stuff. If you want to check in and see what's going on with the Rainbow Rockers spiel, follow us along as we test our hand at the play-by-play. And I will do my best. No promises, but I will do my best to not do a blatant Vic Router impression, even though I love and respect Vic Router so much as a play-by-play guy. I will try my best not to just do a Vic imitation the whole time. Should be a good time. We don't know the teams yet who we will be calling the games for, as they are qualifier games. So everybody's playing 3-game round robin. Everybody in this field is guaranteed a 4th game. So we'll be calling the 4th game for some teams. So we don't know who it'll be yet, but do know a lot of the teams in this field, a lot of the players. So should be a good time. Hopefully it's some guys who we know and sort of have some anecdotes about. And if not, we'll have a chance to catch up with the teams before the game. So should be a really good time. I'm looking forward to it. Think Scott is as well. A big thank you to the Rainbow Rockers bonspiel for inviting us out to do it. Should be a good time. And all the sponsors of the Rainbow Rockers spiel and the people who made this possible, because it's a pretty good streaming setup. The Ottawa Curling Club doesn't have a permanent setup, not part of Curling Stadium. So this comes in just for this spiel. Last year, it was really well done, high quality. Hopefully we can meet that standard and don't bring down the quality too much with our commentary. We'll see how it goes, but very excited to do that. So 2:00 and 4:30 Eastern time, we'll be doing the play-by-play. So if you want to join us for that, should be a very good time. And if not, we will talk to you next week when we're back with another new episode. But until then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that insert.
Make the final.